Hello, hello, hello. See if I can't get this situated. Alrighty. I'm not sure why I'm blurry on Patreon. Am I blurry on? Let's see. All right. Am I blurry on YouTube as well? No, I'm not. Okay. I wonder why I'm blurry on Patreon, but we'll move past that for now. So right before I was about to go live, y'all, I had a power outage here at my house, uh, so that's why I'm late. So I do apologize for that. Let me know if you guys can hear me. If you can hear me, okay, just say yes. If not, then I'll need to readjust that. Okay, somebody said yes. Gina says yes. Cool. Cool, cool. Pastor M says hello. Hello, everyone. I can hear you loud and clear. Okay, good, 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 good. So we are live, and it's been a minute. It's been a while. As many of you can see, the last time you've seen me live, my hair was much shorter. My beard was trimmed more. And now I look like I'm emerging from under a rock. That is indeed where I've been for the past however many months, weeks, months, trying to churn out this MLK project, of course. Now that the series is over, thank God, thank the Lord. Now that it's over, we are trying to finalize the DVD distribution and all that good stuff. And so those will be going out hopefully before long. So, how many of you have had a chance? And of course, I'm talking to you guys on Patreon. Of course, I'm streaming on YouTube as well. Hello, YouTube. But for those of you who are on Patreon, how many of you have seen episode 11 in its entirety? Episode 11, of course, is the season finale. Episode 11, season 2, is a series finale of the MLK project. It's wrapped up now, and it's a almost 3.5 hour episode. Um, and you know, there were some folks who were trying to dissuade me from having it be 3.5 hours, but I just went ahead and made it 3.5 hours anyway, just because the information needs to be told. Um, Truth be told, it would have been 5.5, maybe 6 hours, but there's a lot of scenes that hit the cutting room floor, a lot of deleted scenes. And of course, I'm going to be releasing those deleted scenes sporadically on Patreon. So you'll be able to see all those. There's a lot of deleted scenes. But yeah, um, the story needed to be told. And my position on the whole, well, people aren't going to watch it. It's 3.5 hours. My position on that is, so, so what? If somebody doesn't want to watch it because it's 3.5 hours and they would rather watch a TikTok video or a reel because they prefer much shorter attention spans, that's not to knock them or anything. It's just the MLK project maybe is not their cup of tea. There's a lot of people out there doing coverage on MLK and the real history of MLK, especially as we lead up to 2027 and the release of the MLK files, which I don't really think all the files will be released in 2027, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, again, anything that is done or conducted within the political realm is never going to happen the way it's supposed to happen or pan out the way it's supposed to pan out, because you have not only people involved, you have politicians involved, and politicians by and large are worse than people. But with that being said, I don't really think the whole thing is going to be released. That's just me. I mean, you already have, folks going before, what's that Hispanic Congresswoman's name? Something Luna. They call it the Luna Committee, right? She's the one who's in charge of the FBI files and the MLK files and all that. And she already has people coming before her saying, please, please, for the love of God, don't release these aspects of the MLK files and those aspects of the MLK files. And so, it's all political theatrics. Of course, in the time since MLK was assassinated and today, in that space of time, as we demonstrate in episode 11, we have an MLK holiday that happened in the late 80s. We have the 40-foot MLK statue, which Obama says is a permanent statue. It's here for the long haul. It's never going to go away. It's a monument to our collectivism. You have Obama saying that in 2011, whenever that they had the opening ceremony for that MLK memorial. So you have that erected in Washington, D.C. Ever since Ronald Reagan passed the MLK holiday bill in the late 80s, you had every president since then, Republican and Democrat, redouble their efforts to say, look, to get in front of a television camera and say, look, we're going to recommit ourselves to the dream of Martin Luther King again and again and again and again. So all of this stuff has happened since the assassination of King in 1968. And in such a climate, living downstream of all that, if you were to ask me, Chad, do you think the files in their entirety are going to be released in 2027? I would venture to say no. I don't really. Let me say this. I won't believe it until I see it. How about that? I won't believe it until I see it. I'll just leave it at that. But my point, though, is that in the lead up to 2027, you have a lot of people who are coming out and who are doing their own kind of exposés of MLK. Of course, you had John Doyle over at The Blaze do his reels, his TikTok videos, and of course, his longer form content on his YouTube. Of course, you have Matt Walsh, who just did a documentary. He did episode 1 that was released a week and a half ago. And apparently, he's going to be releasing episode 2, which is the final episode of the civil rights movement for his project that will be released in a week or so. And then, of course, you have me, who did 19 episodes. And so there's all kinds of different flavors that fulfills different appetites of how much you want to know about the civil rights movement. And there's different voices, I guess, that people prefer. And so if you would rather watch one of those, or if you want to watch all of them, by all means, I'm not stopping you. But if you don't want to watch a 3-hour episode, you don't have to. That's your right. But my thinking is that over the next few months, you'll begin to see more people share different scenes or different clips from episode 11 into the internet ether, because it covers a lot of ground. It covers a lot of bases. So, sound is out of sync, somebody said. Yeah. So here's the deal. I don't know if my sound is still out of sync. Do you talk about Jim Jones? No, I don't talk about Jim Jones in this docu series. I don't believe Martin Luther King knew Jim Jones, although Jim Jones says he met Martin Luther King, but there's no way I can corroborate that. There's no way I can corroborate that in my notes and my archives, and so I chose to leave it out, especially since it's a bit distracting. Even though Jim Jones was doing a lot of what King was doing, only he was more vocal about it. It's distracting from the main point, which is the MLK project. Jim Jones deserves a documentary in himself. So, okay. Somebody said my sound is out of sync. I don't know how to go about fixing that. There's issues. See, every time I choose to go live, there's something weird that happens. Either my power will go out. Well, we might have we might go weeks without no rain, but then all of a sudden, the night I decide to do a live stream, we have a thunderstorm roll in. So it's the weirdest thing. But I don't know how that would affect the synchronization of my audio and my video. But here we are. I am using StreamYard, and truth be told, I had more issues with StreamYard than not. So I may or may not be switching over to a different streaming platform before long. But I will be doing more live streams now that the MLK project is completed, and we're going to be getting into some other documentaries as well. So, but yeah, be on the lookout for those of you who are on Patreon um, for some of the deleted scenes that will be released sporadically. Okay, so do I have any questions from those of you who've actually watched episode 11 of the MLK project? I'm fielding those now. I want to come back to those, but for now, I wanted to address something. Over the course of the MLK project, let's see, we released episode 1, season 1 in October 2025. Here we are at the end of May 2026. So that's how long it took to get 19 episodes of the MLK project out. So in that time, I've gotten a lot of great feedback. As I say all the time, a lot of emails, a lot of DMs from educators, from school administrators, from homeschool mothers, people who are blessed by the information that we're covering, people who are asking me for a curriculum to go along with this history, because we cover, of course, more than just the civil rights movement. We cover a lot of surrounding history because it's all relevant and it's all pertinent, especially for those of you who have watched episode 11. You know just as well as anyone that we go beyond just MLK and just the civil rights movement and look at this kind of overall agenda, which is why we call it Motives Unmasked. So we have a lot of great and positive feedback from people. In that time, our YouTube channel has grown by a few thousand people. Our Instagram page has grown by several 100,000 people. And so there's a lot of people who this information is resonating with, because it gives new light and new insight to a lot of the things that we see happening still today. So that is, I guess, that speaks to the necessity of this project. At the same time, we've gotten some criticism, and a lot of the criticism I tend to ignore because it's not substantive criticism. I'm open to criticism. By all means, criticize, scrutinize. I welcome it, right? So long as you're coming in good faith. So a lot of the criticism has not been substantive. It just has been ad hominem attacks. It just has been like people pearl clutching at the fact that you would dare go after such a sacred cow. It's a lot of that. But to the extent that I get substantive criticism, I do pay attention to that, and I think it warrants feedback. Of course, I wasn't able to give feedback over the course of the last 6 months or however long it's been that this project has been unfolding. Although I did engage in 2 debates, probably against my better judgment. One with Austin Broughton. He calls himself Austin off script, or Dr. Julio. I debated him on the Digital Social Hour podcast with Sean Kelly, and I debated Delano Squires, of course, on Jason Whitlock's show. So probably shouldn't have done that, even though there's a lot of people who to this day say that they glean a lot of information from those 2 interactions. I shouldn't have done it because it distracted from the work that I needed to be doing. And perhaps if I was more focused on getting the MLK project out and the production of it, it would have been out. Episode 11 would have gotten to you way sooner than it actually did, and the DVDs even perhaps. So I'm kicking myself for that. But there's also been people who's been taken to YouTube, social media, and have been criticizing the work. Again, a lot of it is just hogwash and ad hominem attacks and calling me names. But then there's some stuff that people are challenging me on the details and the facts of what's being presented. Those are the ones that I pay attention to, because those are the conversations that need to be had. Because for far too long, the narrative surrounding King has been nothing but romanticism, nothing but propagandizing and programming, and acting as if it's a matter of fact that it's unquestioned that this man was next to God, that this man was such a hero and such an esteemed individual among men. That's a narrative that we're often faced with, but we never stop to really think about, okay, was what King and the Civil Rights Movement doing a net positive, or was it a net negative? Did it derail the organic reformation and progress that was being made and veer it toward the left to a kind of Babylonian trajectory, if that makes sense? Did we, trade our dignity and our resilience, irrespective of race, for this notion that politics fixes all on the back of the civil rights movement, or as thanks to the civil rights movement? These are the conversations that I think need to be had between those who are pro-King and those who are anti-King narrative. But it's a conversation no one's willing to engage in. People tend to either engage in fight or flight, but it's not let's fight on the merits of the substance of what's being argued. Instead, it's I'm going to call you names. I'm going to attack you. I'm going to ask you stupid questions like, what have you done for the Black community? Nonsense like that, in order to try to distract and detract from the conversation that needs to be had, right? And a note here, I'm not so much interested in having conversations surrounding the heroism of King with people who are secular, people who are anti-God or anti-Christian, right? I'm not so much interested in having such a conversation with those people, because we don't have a kind of a mutual authority that we come under. I'm only interested in having this conversation with people who profess to be Christians, because if you profess to be a Christian and I profess to be a Christian, we have a mutual authority under which we claim to subordinate ourselves to live under. And so we can look to the scriptures to dictate how we are to look at this situation and that situation and this person and that person, right? We can judge rightly based on the authority of what saith the Lord. So I'm only interested in having such a conversation with Christians. And truth be told, there are some non-Christians who can have a substantive conversation as it pertains to King and the Civil Rights Movement, because downstream of Christian ethics, you have Western civilization, which speaks to areas of liberty and individual responsibility and how big the government ought to be and so on and so forth, right? So you can have that conversation, but again, you have to be selective in who you're having these conversations with. Otherwise, you're just wasting your breath, because a lot of people don't a lot of people don't communicate to understand and to be understood. A lot of people communicate just for the purpose of bashing that which they don't understand and, flapping their gungs, as it pertains to things they don't know anything about. And so with that being said, I wanted to show you one such person who criticized the MLK project, which he has not watched, right? But he had an issue. He took issue with me. I don't know this guy. Somebody shared his video with me, but they took issue with the fact that I claim with receipts that King was a Marxist. And he says, well, if King was a Marxist, then how do you explain X, Y, and Z? So I'm going to show you what who this guy is and what his criticism is, because I think it's worth talking. I think it's worth talking about. I think these conversations are worth having. And with that being said, let me try to pull this up instead of wasting your guys' time. I know it's been a while since I've been live, so I feel like I have a lot to say. I feel like I'm just yapping. But I'm just going to show you this guy and his criticism of the MLK project, criticism of me, criticism of my claims. And we're going to get into it. We're going to break it down.
Some people will disregard the findings of the FBI and believe Chad O. Jackson. Why? Because confirmation bias, because they're racist and they want to cling to these racist ahistorical narratives. But now let's listen to Dr. King. Let's take a moment to kind of just reflect. Dr. King goes to Grenada, Mississippi. Black people in Grenada, they're living in deplorable conditions. Housing is awful. And there's a big supermarket in the town of Grenada that is actively discriminating against Black residents. And the Black residents in Grenada, they live in the midst of a food desert. So they have to go to this, it's called the Pack and Sack in Grenada, right? They go to this supermarket where they are just discriminated against, mistreated. And those of you that are familiar with Marxism, communism, those of you who actually know what it is, tell me if this is compatible. Dr. King goes to Grenada, Mississippi to launch a campaign. He wants to build a supermarket in Grenada, Mississippi. And he wants this supermarket to compete with the supermarket that's across town. So what it sounds like is a lot like, and Chad Jackson is a big fan of Booker T. Washington, right? And Booker T. Washington cast down your buckets, right, where you are. Booker T. Washington was all about, look, let's build from within. Let's build our own businesses. Okay, so it sounds a little bit like that. I'd be interested to know whether or not Chad Jackson even touches Dr. King's Grenada campaign in his documentary. If he does, I'd be interested to know how he gets around this. If he doesn't, that's pretty convenient. Again, I haven't watched the documentary because it's behind a paywall. I refuse to give this man any money.
Pardon the issues there with the overlays and whatnot. It's been a while since I've been on a live stream, so usually the image of what I'm displaying is over here and I'm over here. But this time I'm in the background and the image is right in front of me, so you can't see my lovely mug as the video is playing. But that's fine. I gotta re-educate myself on how to use StreamYard, apparently. So you heard what he said. Again, not sure who this guy is. But he took issue with my calling King a Marxist and saying, look, King's not a Marxist. See, look here. He wanted Blacks to start a business in Grenada, Mississippi, specifically a grocery store. I bet Chad doesn't cover that in his docu-series or documentary. And he's right, I don't. But it's actually for his sake, whether he realizes it or not, that I don't, because it only further proves King's Marxism. And here's how. Let's give you a little backstory here. So Grenada, Mississippi. What's the backstory as it pertains to this whole sitch? So in 1966, there's a man by the name of James Meredith who decides to lead a march from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. And this became known as the Meredith March. And what happened is James Meredith ended up getting shot, right? He was wounded. He ended up living. He's still alive today, in fact, at least last I checked. But his being shot turned the so-called Meredith March into a national headline story. And as a result of this national headline story, you had all these civil rights personalities pouring into Mississippi to join the Meredith March, thereby making it this big thing, right? And because he was shot, you had a lot of white people who were making concessions and saying, this is, this injustice is just gross. It's not demonstrative of what we stand for as a country. I'm going to make this concession or that concession, this concession or that concession, right? So that's what was happening at the time. Similar to the George Floyd situation. What happened after George Floyd died? Of course, you had all these corporations coming out saying, you know what, this is just, so unjust and Blacks shouldn't have to live like this. We're going to donate X amount of money to this Black organization, that we're going to hire so many black people. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, making all these concessions, right? Same situation. Some of those officials back in 1966, of course, were Grenada, white Grenada city officials. They come out and they make all these promises. We're going to hire so many blacks. We're going to crack down on, desegregation. So to the extent that private businesses are practicing segregation, we're going to crack down on them. We're going to hire black voter registrars so that they can open up voting for black people as much as we can. Never mind the fact that Bayard Rustin himself, who was one of King's advisors, would admit in the 80s that after all of this striving for enfranchising the Negro, giving the Negro the right to vote, most Negroes were actually not interested in voting. Once they received, and never mind the fact that blacks could vote since the late 1800s, neither here nor there. Whenever you go through all these measures of passing the Voting Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act and all these different legislative actions, blacks still weren't showing up to the polls and the numbers we thought that they would, right? So let's set that aside for now. So you have these white city officials in Grenada, Mississippi, who are making concessions, making promises that they were going to do X, Y, and Z. And they do these things for a time, but then after the national sensationalism around James Meredith being shot begins to wane, the white city officials begin to not be as they begin to not be as enthusiastic in enforcing all of these different concessions and promises that they were making. So as a result of this, King and the SCLC goes back to Grenada, and they are basically shaking their fists at the Grenada officials and saying, y'all gave us a promissory note. Now y'all are reneging on this, and we demand that you give us what you promised. Same as Jamal Bryant. A lot of you might remember Jamal Bryant did the exact same thing. In 2020, when all the sensationalism around George Floyd was going on, you had Jamal Bryant kind of taking notice of things, claims that Target was making, claims that Dollar General was making, claims that all of these large corporations were making. And then after the George Floyd sensationalism began to wane and Target began to renege, you had Jamal Bryant launch the so-called Target boycott, right? And so King is encouraging the boycotting of white businesses in Grenada, Mississippi. There is a guy by the name of Leon Hall, among some other blacks in Grenada, who had the idea of doing the boycott to begin with, right? And they had the idea of doing the grocery store. The grocery store was not King's idea. The guy who you just watched in this clip said that King had this bright idea and he went to Grenada to implement it. No, it wasn't King's idea. It was the locals' idea, right? But it wasn't a thing of, let us go to Grenada, Mississippi and start businesses because these black folks don't have businesses. No, that wasn't it at all. It was true, and it was true Leninism, Marxism, insofar that what Lenin wanted was a collective public ownership of goods and resources, right? The guy in the clip, and try to stay with me because I'm making a point here. The guy in the clip said that, well, Chad loves Booker T. Washington. What King was doing was like Booker T. Washington is the point that he's trying to make. No, it wasn't at all. Because what Booker T. Washington was doing with Tuskegee is training individuals to have the wherewithal and the skill and the mindset to go out and start businesses, right? From each to another. Start your own businesses. He started the Negro Business League with the hopes that people will start their own businesses. He wasn't talking about collective ownership of property and goods and services like King was talking about. And like those who actually started the idea of the grocery store we're talking about, right? And we're going to get into the grocery store here in a moment. So King has this, idea of sending SCLC members into Grenada, Mississippi to assist with what was already going on. And we're going to, play some of those clips for you because I have clips and I have receipts. So first clip we're going to play is from Leon Hall. Now, Leon Hall, once again, is one of these individuals who had the idea of starting the boycott. He had the idea of, he was one of the people who had the idea of starting the publicly owned grocery store, the community grocery store, which was a Marxist idea, right? He had this idea of starting the community grocery store, much like what we see Zaha Mamdani talking about. And in this clip, we see Leon Hall walking around Grenada, Mississippi, bragging about all the businesses that they were able to get shut down. And he's referring to white people as crackers and all this. Yeah, we got that crackers business shut down. We got that crackers business shut down. And this is a person who was King's kind of liaison when it came to implementing a lot of what King was trying to do in the whole country. And this clip that you're about to see is in 1968 when the boycott was going on for 2 years, because remember, it started in 66. And King is trying to get blacks across the country to show up to Washington, D.C. for his Poor People's Campaign. Again, King was more enthusiastic and more invested in lobbying the government for our daily provisions than he was in casting down your bucket where you are, lifting yourself up by your bootstraps, utilizing the resources that you have within yourself and within your skill set to make your way in America. The free market enterprise system is not a very difficult system. It's all a matter of, let me learn this skill. Let me get this training. Somebody will teach me. Let me get this training. Let me get this skill. There are needs in my immediate community, and I can offer this service. I can offer this skill. I can offer this good to those who are around me. And then from there, so long as I'm making a good product or doing a good service, that business will grow. That business will scale, right? This is how Hispanics do it whenever they come over here and they move into a low income neighborhood or community. I've seen it firsthand. Whenever my wife and I got married, we moved to a predominantly Hispanic community in South Dallas. Nothing but Hispanic families. A lot of them couldn't even speak English, right? But you saw them starting little businesses. I know one guy in particular, his name is Eddie. Like back when I was living in this predominantly Hispanic community there in Oak Cliff, Eddie is pretty much a millionaire now. But when I knew him back then, the guy was broke because he utilized resources, he learned skills and was able to provide a service to his immediate neighbors, and from there grow. He didn't go knocking down the door of of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., demanding that the government gives him provisions, right? That's not how you do things, but that's what King did. So the clip that I'm about to show you is from 1968, right? You see Leon Hall, who King is trying to get to galvanize and collectivize people in Grenada, Mississippi, to go to Washington, D.C. for the Poor People's Campaign, the Poor People's March, which, of course, is covered in episode 11. So let me stop blabbing, and I'm going to show you. I have a lot of clips, so let me show you this one first. Why can't I see? Okay, this should be big enough for me to see. Okay, Leon Hall. All right, clip one.
In Grenada, Mississippi, Leon Hall has found another way to recruit for King's March, to use an already existing organization, in this case, his own successful 2-year boycott of white-owned stores.
How you do, Pop? Bro, that store there out of business, that one next door to it, I got 2 or 3 on this side of town. We don't line those. That one, all of them, that one on the corner, we drove all those out of business. That one there, that we just killed them crackers on that side of the street. Good morning, gentlemen. How y'all feel? Y'all ain't shopping down here this morning, are you? No. Well, all right, don't y'all shop down here. You don't buy nothing from them crackers. Yes, sir. We're gonna have us a color man run for mayor soon. I want y'all to vote for me. Them stores over there, we got that second one over there. That big one down there with that dollar sign. That was the biggest supermarket in Mississippi. They have sales every week, but for the last 2 years, they haven't had a sale. There's some nice suits in there, too. I like that coat, man.
Leon, out recruiting for King, had learned that there was still time for him to get a candidate on the ballot in a local election.
I'm trying to figure out would it be best. I need to have somebody that look into things. I need to know what is best for that guy to run for city councilman or run for mayor. Good morning. How y'all feel? Get out of that truck, man. How you feel? I come to talk business. You sitting up in a truck, politicking. I know what y'all doing. Anything you think?
Discussing business, huh?
Yes, sir. I figured out we don't need no petition. You just need to pay $10 qualifying fee. Now, that's what them crackers say. What we're going to do, the deadline tomorrow. So what we want you to do is to pay that qualifying fee today.
Okay.
Okay.
But the main business at hand this day in early March, with 6 weeks to go to the target date in Washington, was recruiting, and Leon would drive 450 miles today. But he knew that here, Dr. King was the right man to be working for.
In the South, King is still the leader. Now, in the North, they got little Johnny-come-latelys. But in the South, Dr. Bring, who come hell or high water, whomever he may be, they don't have no stuff for Martin Luther King. And it's the thing, I'm glad of it. But, and see, the thing that makes King so successful in the South, it isn't that he spends so much time. In fact, he spends very little time here. But it's because of our people that are out in different communities working. And one thing about our staff usually works for the most part, particularly in the South, because you have to work to stay on top of things. I'll tell you, you don't get a chance to rest and drink scotch and eat caviar. You're going to work down here. You've got to get your list of your demands. Like this what she's saying, put it on paper.
Leon Hall's technique for involvement is enlisting specific grievances. And here in Quitman County, Mississippi, the poorest county in America, there are a lot of them.
Go to Washington with a list.
That's right.
With the county name over it, saying this people in Quitman County tired of mid-state opportunity, or they tired of etc. We tired of people in Quitman County living on farms and working there day in and day out till they kill themselves, don't even have a burial policy, don't know how they're going to be put in the ground. So you've got to get this list to me. We want county by county, a list of your specific demands. No matter if you don't even worry about it. You may say, well, they already talk about the housing and the jobs. Yeah, put it down on there. We want everybody that's got whatever you grab. If you just mad about the garbage man don't pick up the garbage, put that down and get your list of your grievances down. We've got to get our demands together, and don't worry about how many it is. Some people have been telling me about we cut it down. Put every one of them down there. Put every one of them, whatever you mad about.
Alrighty, so there's a lot there. I'll only address a few things because I think I set the clip up when I said that, when I gave the context of here we are 2 years into this boycott. You have Leon walking around Grenada bragging about all of the grocery stores and the businesses that he was able to get shut down. And mind you, the clip that I played from I'll call him Homeboy because I already forgot his name. The clip that I played from Homeboy earlier, the black pastor who was complaining about what is and what isn't in Chad's docuseries. He said that the blacks in Grenada, Mississippi, lived in a food desert, right? And this is one of the words that they like to throw around these days, a food desert. He says the blacks in Mississippi, in Grenada, lived in a food desert, right? But it's like, do they live in a food desert because there's legitimately no grocery stores? Or do they live in a food desert because all of your little agitation and activism is getting the grocery stores shut down that are there? Right? You're getting the grocery stores that are there shut down, and then you complain about living in a food desert. And I've seen, testimonies from, locals in Grenada, Mississippi prior to 1966, who, from folks who claim that they actually never were mistreated at the grocery store. I mean, you go to a grocery store, I go to a grocery store. For those of you who are in your 70s and 80s, I remember, I would like to think that when you were going to grocery stores back in the day, back in the 60s, you don't really remember any kind of mistreatment. I mean, how does one go about being mistreated at a grocery store? But of course, any human interaction, you're going to have pleasant interactions, you're going to have not so pleasant interactions. But, that's just life, irrespective of race. But the grocery store in town that they were talking about actually employed blacks as well as whites. And guess what? The whites got paid the same as blacks, right? Of course, it wasn't even. Of course, it wasn't more blacks than there were whites. But the fact of the matter is, if they were truly discriminative, they wouldn't have hired any blacks at all, right? Folks, a lot of what we hear, a lot of the narratives and propaganda we hear, understand that those people embellish and they exaggerate so as to make a point, because it's all about power. It's a power struggle with these people. It's about coveting power. And they use the victim narrative as sword and shield, right? They use these embellished narratives to say, look, I'm a victim. So it's meant to shield me from any kind of criticism. But at the same time, they use it as a sword. Because I'm a victim, because you've mistreated me, we need X, Y, and Z. You need to do X, Y, and Z for me. So they use it as sword and shield. And it makes them untrustworthy. So when the so-called pastor, and I feel sorry for his parishioners, and I mean that genuinely, but when he sits up there and talk about a food desert and we were being mistreated based upon something that you saw probably on TikTok, right? Because there's no way that you can sit up there on that stream and give that narrative confidently if you've done your research, if you looked into what was actually going on. And it doesn't just end with that clip that I just shared with Leon Hall, because I have more. But toward the end of the clip, you see Leon Hall, who said he wants to run for mayor, right? Because it's about power. He's sitting there with some people in this living room and he's saying, I need you to go into your communities and just find people who are mad. They're mad about this, mad about that. Whatever the grievance is, I don't care. Find people who are mad and bring them here. Because he wants to consolidate and he wants to build his campaign and build his strategy around people who are mad, people who are angry. This is what communists do, right? I have in my hand here the essential works of Lenin. It's not all of his works. It's 3 of his major works. But in this book, I lost my bookmark, but it's okay because I'm streamed to the page. But yeah, in this book, Lenin says that a revolutionary social democracy, of course, I mean, this is specifically, it's the essential works of Lenin, but this work specifically that I'm reading from is What is to be Done, which, if you want to understand the civil rights movement, both the civil rights movement and the subsequent Black Power movement, you need to understand Lenin, right? A lot of y'all are always asking me, what book should I buy? Buy Lenin. You need to understand Lenin. You need to understand, it's kind of like what Lenin is, for those of you who played sports, especially football, like I did in high school. It's like you're going up against a rival team next week, and somehow or another, you found the rival team's playbook. You found their strategy to go up against you, right? That's what Lenin is. If you want to understand a lot of the so-called leftism that's going on today, whether in the secular world or in the church, you need to understand Lenin, right? So for those of you who are always asking me, what book should I buy? Start with this, Lenin's Essential Works. This, of course, is the abridged version. I recommend getting the unabridged version so you can get the full context, of course, because depending on the editor, they're going to take out some of the juicier stuff so as to make Lenin look more tame than what he actually was. But so I'm looking at What is to be done. Lenin says revolutionary social democracy includes the fight for reforms in its activities. It utilizes economic agitation for the purpose of presenting the government not only demands for all sorts of measures, but also the demand that it ceases to exist. Moreover, it considers it to be its duty to present this demand to the government, not on the basis of the economic struggle alone, but on the basis of all manifestations of public and political life. All manifestations of public and political life. In a word, it is subordinate. Well, in a word, it subordinates the struggle for reforms to the revolutionary struggle for liberty and for socialism, right? It subordinates everything for the purpose of liberty and socialism. So when you see Leon Hall in that living room saying, I don't care if they're mad about the garbage man won't pick up the trash. I don't care if they're mad about this, mad about that. Bring them here, right? It's Leninism 101. Find the disinherited, the disenfranchised, the discontent, the rejects of society, not by virtue of their birth, but by virtue of what they are or are not willing to do. Find those people who who perceive the glass as being damn near empty, rather than those who see it as half full. Find those people, because as the old saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so, to the extent that you can get all of these people who feel dispossessed, all these embittered people, you're able to build an army, and you're able to further your agenda. So that's what's going on there. Again, in episode 11, as well as other episodes throughout this project, we point to ways in which the civil rights movement, as it pertains to King himself, relates to or correlates to a lot of what we see in Lenin, because King was a Leninist, right? King was a Leninist. Of course, part of the Leninist strategy is to deny having any affiliation with communism whatsoever. Fidel Castro followed the same playbook. On his quest to power, he denied being a communist. He denied being a Leninist. He denied having anything to do with communism. He spoke to the grievances of the Cuban people and the oppressiveness of the Cuban government, right? But once he obtained power, once he acquired power, then he came out as a communist. This is the way that this works. J.B. Matthews talked about it, and the American Mercury, a few articles that he wrote for the American Mercury, as well as before the HUAC committee, about how the communists infiltrated the church, as well as many colleges and universities. Am I still alive? Come on. Am I still live? Type yes if I'm still live. Okay. My screen just went off, so I don't know what happened. Okay. So yes, J.B. Matthews talked about this. You can verify this. It's all factual. Of course, King is going to deny having anything to do with communism, because he wants to get into the good graces of the people. He wants to come off as you know, as pro-America. He wants to come off as all these things. But if you listen to what he's saying, you pay attention to what he's doing, you realize, oh, you are actually a communist and a Leninist. And what's disheartening to me most about all this, folks, especially that black pastor homeboy who was criticizing my work earlier, is that of all people, Christians should have discernment and be able to see this, right? Jesus said that you will know a tree by its fruit. Jesus also warned against false prophets who present themselves as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. That's what Jesus said. He said a good tree cannot produce bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot produce good fruit. That's what Jesus said. He said, you will know them by their fruit. He said, test every spirit to see if it's of God. Do you think Washington, D.C. will erect a 40-foot statue of a person who is really about the Father's business? For those of you who watch episode 11, you can hear Claiborne Carson, not Claiborne Carson. Who am I thinking of? Who am I thinking of? The congressman out of Michigan, John Conyers. John Conyers, who was the only politician that King ever publicly endorsed for office. John Conyers himself, who was close to King and who was close to Stanley Levison, said himself that King never actually tried to get people or convert people to Christianity. He said he didn't care what religion you were or weren't, so long as you were willing to join the struggle. That's Leninism, folks. Put on the clothes of the enemy. Lenin said this, put on the clothes of the enemy so that little by little you might win them over. That's King. He's describing King to a T. So King is playing the part of a reverend, knowing full well he doesn't believe in the virgin birth. He didn't believe in the resurrection. He didn't believe in the second coming. He didn't believe in the literal existence of hell. These are things that King said himself. He told you that. And then he goes on throughout the rest of his career, the duration of his career, to push a Leninist agenda. And those who are closest to him, not one of them ever talked about how King tried to preach Christ to people. In fact, they do the opposite, as John Conyers did, and you can see it in the docuseries. King never tried to convert people to Christianity. That's what Conyers said. I wish I could play the clip right now, but I don't have it queued up. If you want to watch it, simply go to the episode 11 if you haven't already seen it. So that's what Hall is doing. And we'll play clip 2 of Hall in the same respect.
Then to a meeting room of the Freedom Democratic Party in Hattiesburg, an activist group formed by Stokely Carmichael, Leon's old friend. Leon will work with these people, recruiting for the campaign.
We ain't barring nobody, and don't be worried about it. You know there's some young cats around here, some young guys like myself, who mad about going to that war in Vietnam.
That's right.
And they mad because they can't do nothing but stand on that block in front of that pool room down the street down there. Or in that hole in the wall, they sitting there down there. They ain't got nothing to do. That's just like a job to them. They sit there all day long like a knot on a log. Tell them, say, y'all come on, y'all. I know some of us may be scared to go down there because they look so rough, but go and talk to them. Right now, we're trying to recruit the black nationalists and guys that are so upset about it and so frustrated, because these are the kind of cats you find some of your most articulate black people, some of your most energetic black people, some of the smartest black folks in the country, and the nationalists. They've gotten caught up in the bind, and they're so frustrated, and they just can't take it no more. They say, before I be a slave any longer, I'd truly rather be dead than in my grave. So what they say, we'll go out and burn down the town if it comes to that. Now, these are the kind of people we need to take them and bring all that energy you want to burn with and sit up there and talk to President Johnson and look him right square in the eye and tell him like a man. Say, now, Brother Johnson, we here one last time to tell you, now, you're going to have to stop the war in Vietnam, first of all. Secondly, bring the money from Vietnam that you were going to spend down the Mississippi and feed us with it. Come and refund these Head Start programs. And I realize when I get to watch this, it ain't going to be no easy job. It ain't gonna be a thing I can march today and sing We Shall Overcome This Evening and come back home. I may have to sleep on the cherry tree. I may have to sleep out on the Washington Monument. I may be in jail sleeping. But whatever it is, I don't care. Because I know what I'm asking for. If I get it, I ain't got no more problem worrying about something to eat. I ain't got no problem worrying about somewhere to sleep. The one problem is we got to get together. We got to put some massive pressure on it. It's just like when a snake bites you on your leg. You got to put pressure there to keep it from blood poisoning. And I'll tell you, we got snake poisoning in us. A rattlesnake that bit this country. Whether we want it or not, the poisoning is moving up. The venom from the snake is spreading through us, and it's by the skies of racism.
That's right.
That's what it is.
In Atlanta.
You see now, brother, what we got to do is we got to take all these Negroes who are, who don't want to go to Vietnam, and we must channel that energy, and we must go to Washington, D.C. and look Brother Johnson right in the face and tell him, look, brother, you need to take all that money that you are spending down in Vietnam and take that back to Washington, D.C. and feed us with it. Is that somebody who's following the program of Booker T. Washington? Is that somebody who's casting down their bucket where they are? Is that somebody who's utilizing the skills and the resources that they have to make something of themselves? Bring that money down to Washington, D.C. and feed us with it. What? But this is a person that King had working as his liaison in Grenada, Mississippi. I'm not making this up. But yet, Pastor Homeboy, since Chad, since he loves Booker T. Washington so much, what King was doing was like, no, it wasn't like Booker T. Washington. Not even a little bit. So I just showed you Leon Bridges. Who am I thinking of? Leon Hall, right? I'm showing you the people on the streets. I'm showing you the locals who King dispatched to do his bidding, walking around Grenada, Mississippi, calling white folks crackers, and we close that white crackers down. We close that crackers business down over there, and over there we close down that crackers grocery store. He hasn't had a sale in 2 weeks, and over there, how you brothers doing over here? Y'all gonna vote for me when I run for mayor, ain't you? Again, Lenin, right? What is to be done? Says Lenin, because I'll remind you, Leon was standing up there talking about how, we need to take all of these young militant Negroes who are burning stuff down, bring them into our movement. Classic Leninism 101. Again, recruit the disinherited, the angry, the embittered, recruit them into the movement because these can be your foot soldiers for the revolution. Discipline them, train them, teach them so they can move from being a rabble rouser to being a strategic revolutionary. That's classic Leninism. Says Lenin, what is to be done? Chapter 3. We must go among all classes of the population as theoreticians, as propagandists, as agitators, and as organizers. When we do that, says Lenin, the most backward worker will understand or will feel outrage by the very same dark forces that are oppressing and crushing him at every step of his life, and feeling that he himself will be filled with an irresistible desire to respond to these things, and then he will organize catcalls against the censors one day. Another day, he will demonstrate outside the houses of the provisional governor. And then another day, and again, he's speaking to the progression of the revolutionaries' training. They move from being a worker who is backward, says Lenin, catcalling. Then the next day, he's outside of the governor, the provisional governor's house, organizing. And then the next day, he will teach a lesson to the gendarmes and let's see. He will teach a lesson to the gendarmes who are doing the work of the Holy Inquisition, etc. Right? The gendarmes, by the way, is a French word for political police. So he will organize against them, and he will teach them a lesson. Right? These same people who are now looting and burning down businesses and rioting and all the things, take these people in, organize them, and mobilize them against the gendarmes, the political police. Right? That's Lenin. And that, of course, is what Leon Hall is doing. And so this, King was a real gangster, right? And he would do this kind of thing. Of course, when he's in the press, when he's on the news, when he's behind a pulpit, he's speaking to the dignity, he's speaking to the injustice. He's doing it in a sermon-like cadence. But, under the surface, he's dispatching people like Leon Hall to do all of this kind of organizing and gathering and all the things, right? In order to radically shift and change things, not in a genuine progressive way, but rather in a kind of Marxist, egalitarian, secular way, right? Which is what Lenin wanted. So let's move along. Some of you might say, well, Chad, You showed me video clips of Leon Hall. You showed me, clips of, him organizing and walking down the streets of Grenada, bragging about businesses he was successful in closing down and this, that, and the third. What about King? Right? Because after all, the claim is that King himself wasn't a Marxist. King himself wanted the grocery store in Grenada, Mississippi. You can't talk about people around King. You have to talk about King himself, is the claim that some of the detractors might make, right? But whatever came of this grocery store, first of all, we already established that it wasn't King's idea, the grocery store, nor was the boycotts King's idea. He just kind of latched on and made it his own, right? So King goes to Grenada, Mississippi, and he talks about how we are going to do this and we are going to do that. And of course, people think that these things are King's idea. And truth be told, it might be why Pastor Homeboy thought that it was King's idea as well, when in reality it wasn't. So let's play some clips from King. I'll start off with a clip about how, let's see, which one do I want to put these in order. So okay. So first, so King is talking about how we need economic and political power, right? And he's not saying this in the sense of what people might think of civil rights. He's saying this in a Marxist sense, because of course Marx wanted power and he wanted to rejigger the economy, change it from a so-called capitalist society to a socialist, a capitalist economy to a socialist economy. This is what King wanted. This is what Marx wanted, but it would be what King wanted. And so people think, and this is the thing, Marxist communists, they will use words, and they continue to do this to this very day, that you think they're talking about one thing, but they're talking about something completely different. One word, for example, is peace, right? You and I as Christians know that Christ is the Prince of Peace, right? You and I know what genuine peace is, but it's not what they mean when they use the word peace. What they mean is something completely different. What they mean is all power consolidated to me, and then I will redistribute resources and wealth, and I will bring about a utopia. And in the manifestation of that utopia, then we will have peace. That's what they mean when they say peace. They don't mean what you mean when they say peace. And so the same is true when King uses the word, uses such phraseology as, look, we just want economic and political power. Of course, this is all revolutionary rhetoric, because of course, by economic power, he's talking about social justice redistribution. And when he talks about political power, he's talking about the end of the nation state and the driving toward a kind of international globalist communist state, because King genuinely believed that that would bring about human happiness. So in order to pull this off, you have to move incrementally, bit by bit, just like Lenin said. You have to subordinate every activity to the overall goal of socialism. And so when you look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when you look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965, these are all geared toward that goal, quite frankly. And so whenever King takes interest in Grenada, again, he's using the kind of a Fabian tactic of incrementalism. Let me send Hosea Williams, who worked for the SCLC, into Grenada in order to organize people for voting. Because to the extent that we can get more blacks voting, we can get more blacks into power. And to the extent that we can get more blacks into power, we can slowly but surely rejigger the American system, as they would do in the 1970s with the starting of the Congressional Black Caucus, who would call themselves the conscience of the Congress, who would be successful in incrementally Sovietizing America. And they still continue to do that to this very day. Incrementally Sovietizing America. That's what a lot of these black politicians are in office to do. And it starts through, and it starts by, wailing and ranting about how the blacks, they can't vote. Our right to vote is restricted from us. We need to send organizers into the community to not only win the so-called right to vote, but to basically shore up as much power in these districts as possible. So here's King doing that with Hosea Williams.
We have a staff in Grenada, Mississippi, headed by Hosea Williams, SCLC's Director of Voter Registration. SCLC's Mississippi staff is attempting to collect on a promissory note of justice given us by Grenada officials at the peak of the Meredith, Mississippi March. SCLC fully intends to nonviolently persuade white Grenadians to pay the promise of equality and justice to their Negro neighbors.
Okay. So you see King there talking about, we're going to send Hosea Williams in, and we are going to hold the white community's feet to the fire to make due on the promises they made in the kind of in the peak of the sensationalism surrounding the Meredith March. Remember earlier when I was talking about George Floyd, 2020, all the promises that were being made by the corporations, right? Some time has passed, and then Target begins to like, you know what, that however many millions of dollars that we promised to the NAACP and to this organization, that we're actually not going to come through on that because this George Floyd thing turned out to be a big lie in terms of, there was fentanyl involved, there was this situation, there was that situation. Of course, I don't know if that's the reason, but for whatever reason, they decided not to give as much money or do as much as they promised to do in 2020 when tensions were high, sensation was high, so on and so forth. Similar situation in 1966. Some time has passed between Meredith getting shot and the promises that Grenada officials made to where they decide, you know what, we're actually, this is actually causing more problems than it's helping anything. We're actually going to pull back on some of these promises that we made or these concessions that we made. So King sends Hosea Williams in, and he says that we were issued a promissory note, of course, recycling language that he used during the 1963 March on Washington. And we're going to and that's another thing they do. They frame what they want white people to do for them as freedom, right? You see how they do that? They conflate you giving me a job, you giving me X, Y, and Z, you giving me a house and all these things. They conflate that with freedom. They collapse all that together, right? I'm not free unless you give me something. That's what King just said. So that's clip one of King surrounding the Grenada issue. Now, what about this grocery store business? I'll ask you all, do you believe that King's interest in Grenada, the Grenada grocery store, is in keeping more with basic free market enterprise, what Booker T. Washington and others advocated for, or is it in keeping with Marxism? I'll ask you that question, and then we'll listen to what King has to say, right? Because people think the moment you start talking about how blacks need to start businesses, they think that that's free market enterprise, right? Because how can it be? Blacks need to start businesses, right? But you have to listen to the context and the totality of what a person is saying. And I want you to listen to the totality of what King is saying before you rush, such as Pastor Homeboy did, to attach what King is advocating for to what Booker T. Washington was talking about. Let's listen to it in its context, shall we?
In Grenada, Mississippi, and all over the state of Mississippi for that matter, the Negro is still at the bottom of the economic ladder. The vast majority of Negroes of this state are poverty-stricken, unable to afford the basic necessities of life.
In the Delta of Mississippi, some 60% of the people, Negro people, are unemployed. 90% or more are poverty-stricken. There are thousands and thousands of Negroes all over the state of Mississippi earning less than $800 a year. This is criminal. This is a shame before the Almighty God. And then the housing conditions are so shameful, the whole nation itself should rise up in shame. Negroes living in rat-infested slums, Negroes living in shacks. This should not be. This does not have to be. We are going to address ourselves to this in this movement. Thirdly, we're going to have to pool our limited resources to build businesses for ourselves. We're going to have to pool our resources and set out to do many of the things that we have not found in the larger society. Now, this is why I want to ask everybody in the adult community to put some money in this supermarket that we are building. This is a great venture. We've already raised some $26,000 or $7,000, including the $3,000 that we raised in a meeting earlier this afternoon. We are going on and raise that money in the next few days and then get a loan from the Small Business Administration. And that supermarket is going to be there as a monument of the determination of the Negroes of Grenada, Mississippi to free themselves. And I want to ask you to support it. Now, everybody can't get $100 worth of shares or $1,000 worth, but I believe almost everybody can get at least $5 or $10 worth so that everybody can feel a part of this cooperative movement. We are going to map a program to really get Grenada not only set up as an open city, but we are going to map a program to get more money in the pockets of the Negro people of the city of Grenada. We are going to work on a program to get better housing. And I'm going to Washington personally to talk with Dr. Weaver, the head of our housing program in this country, about getting, on the one hand, public housing in Grenada and other places in Mississippi where we don't have it, and secondly, to build housing units for low and moderate income families that we ourselves can own. But now there's a plan in the federal government. There's a plan in the housing program where these units can be built 100% financed by the federal government.
I don't know why the end of that was cut off, but he says 100% financed by the federal government. So, so ask yourself the question and really think about this. And I can play it back if you need me to, or you can rewind it. I think you can rewind. But did King mention anything about individuals starting businesses in Grenada, Mississippi? Or did he say we are going to start black businesses in Grenada, Mississippi? That language matters. That juxtaposition matters, because King's not advocating for individuals to start businesses. He's talking about the collective, and he's asking people to buy shares, and it being a community grocery store, a community supermarket, because King believes in public ownership of goods and services, public ownership of property. And some people, some of my detractors might argue, well, Winco. I don't know if Winco is a national store or if it's just a Texas store. When I travel, I don't really tend to see Wincos all over the place. But anyway, Winco, the concept of it is the employees, they have, shares, they own parts, I believe, of the Winco system, the grocery store. Same is true, I believe, of Costco, if I'm not mistaken. Right. But what is the difference? Because, being a shareholder is not a novel thing. It's not a new thing. Right. You can't automatically call that Marxism. Well, for King, it is Marxism, because the mobilizing around such a strategy for King is political. It's basically airing out the grievances of what blacks don't have and what the whites have by comparison. And because the whites have this and we don't have that, we need to pool our resources. We need to have a collective ownership of a supermarket. Right. Understand the context of what's going on here, folks. And he talks about how in the future we will have black businesses. Right now, it's not about that. Right now, it's about mobilizing and marching and winning political power and all these things. Right now, it's about that. But in the future, we will have black businesses, says King. I don't think he uses the words in the future in that clip. He does use it in this next clip. I'm going to go ahead and play it for you now in order to let that simmer.
I just want to say that we feel that this is a most significant move for this community. One of the things that we've been saying all along is in the future, all over the South and all over the United States, we're going to build more businesses in the Negro community, more cooperatives, and we're going all out to achieve economic power. And I think this is one of the first expressions of this in Mississippi, and we intend to follow it through. I think also that this is the beginning of the complete economic redevelopment of Grenada. We're going all out to get federal programs in the community to deal with the housing conditions, which happen to be terribly depressing conditions, and to deal with the general economic deprivation of the Negro. And we feel that this new venture is one of the first and finest expressions of this, and we think it will come into fruition in the not too distant future as an expression of the collective pooling of resources on the part of Negroes in the community of Grenada, Mississippi. I would certainly say this is the kind of concrete, real black power that I believe in. I don't believe in black separatism. I don't believe in black power that would have racist overtones. But certainly if black power means the amassing of political and economic power in order to gain our just and legitimate goals, we all believe in that, and I think all white people of goodwill believe in that. And this is what we are beginning to see in Grenada. We are gaining political power. Some 3,300 Negroes are now registered to vote. And with this new economic venture and even larger ones in the future, this will give the kind of economic and political power to the Negro community of Grenada that will be so significant in achieving and fulfilling legitimate goals.
Okay, I don't know why the ends of these videos keep getting cut off, but I'm not even gonna fool with it. And so, yes, he's talking about in the future, we will have black businesses and thus we will have economic power. Now, I own 2 businesses. I'm sure some of you own businesses, right? The concept of starting a business is for the purpose of providing for yourself and for your family, and for hopefully being able to provide jobs for others, right? It's, nobody starts a business so they can pay taxes, although paying taxes is part of owning a business, right? They don't get into business thinking, you know what, I can't wait to pay the government so the government and wicked politicians can disperse my money to go to programs that I disagree with and toward causes that I disagree with. Nobody starts a business for that. Nobody starts a business, hopefully, because they want economic power for a specific race group or what have you. If you do that, then, I mean, more power to you, I guess. But people start businesses to provide a service and to provide for their families. That's what people start businesses for. King doesn't see the business as that. He sees a business as a means of economic power for the collective, not owned by individuals, one individual owning all the stock in a business that they started, right? Becoming wealthy. King is of the same ilk and contingent of the Obamas of the world. You might remember Michelle Obama during the 2024 election. She said at the DNC that her mom looked down on people. Her mom and dad, they looked down on people who took more than their fair share. I don't know if you all remember that. Right? They looked down on people who took more than their fair share. These are people who like to bully others into embracing socialism. That's the school of thought from which Martin Luther King comes. Not once in that clip or the other clip that I played do you see King advocating for individuals starting businesses irrespective of what the government does. In fact, you see him saying we are going to start businesses, and he's tying it to the hip of what the government does. When he says that, for example, this ties into housing, says King. And we are going to pull for housing completely funded by the federal government. Right? The government doesn't make money. People make money, and then they pay taxes, and that's the money that King is talking about. So he wants to use other people's money so that you can have housing and so that you can have a business that's not really yours. It's the public's business, which is in keeping with Marxism. Let us keep going because I have, I think, 2 more clips, and I know you guys might be tired of seeing all these clips, but I think it proves the broader point here. Let's play another one with King at the pulpit. Oh, King at the pulpit. Oh, slick talking King. Let's play another one with him at the pulpit.
I'm also disturbed about the Congress of our nation. I don't know if you know about this Congress. This Congress perpetrated upon the people of our nation one of the most tragic and saddest acts ever perpetrated on our nation when it failed to allow the Civil Rights Bill of 1966 come to the floor to be voted on. And that bill died in Congress today. That disturbs me. And I want somebody up there in Washington to know that when that bill died, a lot of faith in America died on the part of people who are tired. I want that Congress to know that when that bill died, our nation's verbal commitment to truth died. That bill died in Congress today. Our so-called commitment to democracy died when that bill died. Our so-called commitment to justice died. And I want to say to the white community of America, you can keep on doing this if you like to, You can engage in these suicidal acts if you want to. You're leading our whole nation down a dark alley of defeat. The world is looking at America. 2/3 of the peoples of the world are colored. And they are wondering whether we mean what we say when we talk about democracy. And this kind of reaction only weakens our prestige in the world. But not only that, it increases the frustrations and the despair and the bitterness of all those individuals who've been under the yoke so long. And I say tonight to white America, that there will be no rest, there will be no tranquility in this nation until the Negro has his freedom. And America has a choice now. Either you give the Negro his God-given rights and his freedom, or you face the fact of continual social disruption and social chaos. America, which will you choose?
Who's our leader? Who's our leader? What do you want? What do you want? Dr. King can't hear you.
Who's our leader? Martin Luther King is. That's what they were saying. What do you want? Freedom. When do you want it? Now. King calls this freedom our God-given right. Right? And he collapses it into a bill, the Civil Rights Act of 1966. He says that when that bill died, our commitment to democracy died. When that bill died, our dignity died. When that bill died, I died. Because in that bill was my freedom, my God-given right, says King. Well, what was in that bill? Well, the Civil Rights Act of 1966, which died in committee, and rightly so, dealt with your right to housing, right? It coincides with FDR's so-called Economic Bill of Rights in 1944, where he said that you have a right to universal health care. You have a right to adequate housing. You have a right to X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All things that you have to work for, right? And you can obtain. And Negroes in the most dire conditions were obtaining these things. I can say that firsthand. My paternal side of the family comes from Arkansas. They are Arkansan. They're not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. But over the years, since slavery, they were able to acquire land. We still have that land in our family to this very day. The same is true of my maternal side of the family, who come from Oklahoma. Right? This is not unique to Chad O. Jackson. This is not unique to me. This is true of a lot of Negroes in the South. The reason why many Negroes migrated to the South at the turn of the century, to the North at the turn of the century, is because of Union propaganda that was promising high-payer jobs. And I have in my archives a lot of testimonies from many of those Negroes who migrated north and west to places like California. And I believe I shared some of these videos with y'all before. Some of it is, in writing, others of it is in video, where they're saying that they regret leaving the South. They regret leaving Southern communities for Northern slums, for Northern squalor. This is historical fact. But who's our leader? Martin Luther King is. Oh yeah. Where did that end you up? Where did that get you? I hold in my hand here because I asked a question earlier. What came of this grocery store, this community grocery store? I'm not going to read it. I recommend you all go and read it. But this is the report on the Grenada community grocery store by the Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission, which was written in 1966, right? Look up Mississippi State Sovereignty Commission, Grenada supermarket. This is a detailed report of what came of that grocery store. Folks, it was never built. And when investigators went to go see how it was coming along, all they saw was a foundation and some blocks and some weeds springing up from the foundation. What ended up happening is they raised $18,000, if not more, pocketed the money. Some of the money went to some construction companies, and that grocery store never saw the light of day. And Grenada ended up in the same, if not worse, condition after King left, after the dust settled, than before. Your community grocery store was never materialized at all. But yet Pastor Homeboy wants to convince me that King was about economic empowerment and Black starting businesses. Give me a break. It was tied at the hip to his Marxist idealism, to his Marxist thinking and his Marxist cause. King was all about mobilizing people to descend on Washington for his Poor People's Campaign from 66 to 68. And that's the clip that one of the first clips that I showed you from Leon Hall, who was doing that while simultaneously trying to get people to vote for him for mayor. That's what he was talking about when he said we need to go into, these Black communities and find these disinherited young Negroes who are always present at riots. They always hang out at the pool hall. We need to go get them. We need to get these people. That's what he was talking about, not only for the purpose of voting for him and building around his campaign, but also for the purpose of going to Washington, D.C. for Martin Luther King's Poor People's March. You can go back and watch it if you want. This is rewindable, folks. Who's our leader? Martin Luther King is, said the congregation of duped Negroes. And I say that not disparagingly. I say that with compassion, quite frankly, because we need to wake up from this. The spell still ensnares many of us to this very day. White, Black, and other. So go look at that. I'll put the link for it in the description. For those of you who might need something that you can click, and we'll lead you right to it. But it's actually quite sad, quite frankly. It's actually quite sad. So no, Pastor Homeboy, your point was not proven about King being about economic empowerment. Not, at least not in the case or in the sense of genuine free market enterprise. He was about economic empowerment to the extent that it meant collective ownership of goods, resources, and services, which is diehard Marxism. But you have to listen to what they're saying. Again, the Bible says in Ephesians 5:11, do not take part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but expose them. I'm exposing them. I'm not going to take the narrative. I'm not going to take certain things at face value, regardless of if it's coming from a Republican or a Democrat. I'm going to listen to what is being said, and I'm going to cross-reference it with the scriptures and with other things and look into the background of things, because that's what you do when you have discernment. And I'm not trying to slam dunk on Pastor Homeboy. I'm not trying to one-up Pastor Homeboy. If he's a pastor and he's leading people, my hope is that he will develop prayerfully, first through repentance, the Holy Spirit, which gives you new eyes to see things more clearly. That's my hope for every pastor. Because it will be a great and terrible day when you have to stand before the Lord and account for the life that you've lived. We read at the end of Ecclesiastes that at the end of it all, after all the vanity, after all the chasing of the wind, we are to fear God and keep his commands, for we will all have to give an account for the lives that we have lived. I'm not a pastor. You are, Pastor Homeboy. That's your job. I'm simply asking you to possess the discernment that is needed to see this stuff clearly, instead of trying to cling tightly to a false narrative that was projected by a false prophet. Okay. So with all that said, let me now get to your questions. This is, after all, a Q&A. So if you're on Patreon and you have any questions, now is the time to ask those, because I think that with the comments that have been coming in, they kind of got buried. But before I do that, let me go onto YouTube and get through the supers. All right, super chat. Let me try to blow that up because I can't see it. Come on. Okay. Peace equals paternalistic enforcement from arrogant communist elites. Yeah. I mean, that's that acronym quite fits exactly what it is that they mean when they say peace, or when they use the word peace. So thank you for the super. I really appreciate that. 02122. How are you, by the way? I haven't been in these YouTube streets in a long time. So glad to see you here. Glad to see that you are watching. Hopefully you're still watching. We got another one from, let's see here, Willie Doc for 4056. Haven't seen you in a while either. Welcome. $5 super chat. Thank you. Says, God bless you, Chad, and the work you're doing with the MLK project. How can we pray for you? Just pray for humility, discernment, and protection. Those are my prayer requests: humility, discernment, and protection. Thank you, though. Appreciate that. Okay, let's see. I got any more supers? No, I don't. All right, on over to Patreon. Let me take this off the screen. All right, let's see. Let's see if we have any questions. Any episode 11 questions that you all have? Now is the time to ask. Now is the time to ask. Thank you all so much. This is from Gina. For all you do. Let's see here. Okay. This is a long one. So let me put on my reading glasses because the print is very tiny. Thank you all so much for all you do, for all you did on this project. Your hard work shows. I'll throw out my questions now, but feel free to answer them in different. I should probably move this closer to me. Let me try to blow it up actually before I start doing all that. Okay, yeah, that's way better. Okay, thank you all so much for what you did on this project. Your hard work shows. I'll throw out my questions now, but feel free to answer them in different order with other questions if you want. Question number 1. Do you know if JFK was killed by communist related people? I actually haven't looked into the JFK assassination as much as King. I have heard different plausible theories as it pertains to JFK. But every piece of material that I can get my hands on as it pertains to the assassination of JFK in the past, I've consumed it. But again, there's so many different competing theories that I'm not sure what to believe. There's so many people who had a cause to assassinate JFK, but that's something that I'm not an expert on, nor is it something that I want to start throwing out theories on without having confidence and being sure of what it is that I'm talking about or presenting. But there are others out there that I'm sure that you've come across who can speak to it more intelligibly than I can. Let's see. System, society, blame. No one takes responsibility for change. Were the jobs that were to be created good, or just jobs to help communistic programs? Yeah, I mean, it's the same as like what you see, for example, with George Soros, which we cover in episode 11, where he was kind of put up as this philanthropist, this humanitarian who only wanted to make for a open society, which is another phrase that they throw out, which basically means internationalism, globalism. Quite frankly, I mean, it's a kind of affront to nation states, an affront to national heritage. It's an affront to that, and it's in keeping, as we point out in episode 11, with this whole Babylonian notion of the building of a Tower of Babel. Quite frankly, building a utopia without God is frankly what an open society is. And so when you read period articles as it pertains to the activities of George Soros in the late 80s, 90s into the 21st century, what you tend to see is impressionable journalists talking about basically they refer to George Soros as a capitalist, and they said that he's a capitalist with a heart. The reason they say he's a capitalist with a heart is because he's funding all these different political campaigns, all these different protests, all these different initiatives around the world that are doing quote unquote humanitarian things like building wells and electricity grids and all these things. And they're saying, look, this is capitalism with a heart. And not only that, they basically their eyes turn to hearts whenever they see or hear about how Soros gave away, I think 75% of his wealth or 75% of his income to go toward these humanitarian causes. Well, when you look at how he raises money, which we cover in part, not even the whole breadth of it, but we cover it in part in episode 11. The whole purpose all along was to create these mechanisms to funnel money through to these different organizations and these different programs for the purpose of their overall larger global conspiracy or their global quest, quite frankly. And so it's incrementalism. It's moving bit by bit. Of course, Soros, as it pertains to the media, is looked on as a hero, is looked on as somebody to be respected and looked up to because he's just giving away his money. When the purpose of it all along, if you look at the KGB's involvement and other entities' involvement, and him starting his foundations, starting his organizations, the whole purpose of it was to do exactly what it's doing. And so to answer your question as it pertains to King is, yes, the purpose of these Black businesses is not to legitimately empower Blacks to start businesses like people think he's talking about. No, the purpose is collective ownership of goods and services, collective ownership of property, which is what Marx was advocating for. So that's what King is advocating for. It doesn't come down to Chad's interpretation of what he's saying. No, this is why I played the clips in their entirety. This is why I played, the long form clips of what King was saying without any interruption. So you can hear for yourself what he's saying. Because it's one thing to say, it's one thing to dismiss it. Oh, that's just Chad's interpretation. It's a different thing entirely when you hear what King is talking about and how he ends all of his little diatribes with, we are going to go to the federal government and demand X, Y, and Z to assist us with this. If you're genuinely talking about starting a business, the government doesn't play a role in it except for when it comes time to pay taxes, right? Of course, when it comes to establishing your business too as an LLC, of course, that stuff goes without saying, but he's talking about receiving funds from the government. In some cases, the government funding 100% of housing and other, such things, and then calling that economic empowerment. No, it's empowering the government on the one hand, and it's creating the Marxist wet dream of private ownership or of public ownership collective ownership of property, goods, and services on the other hand. If I said private ownership earlier, I misspoke. King wasn't advocating for private ownership, but rather public ownership. Let's see. They sang MLK's favorite hymns in the March on Washington, or on the march after his death. Did they sing? Oh, did they sing both his favorite hymns and hers? I had trouble reading that, but I get it now. Let's see. Why didn't Reagan expose MLK's Marxist ties? That's a good question. Of course, we cover that briefly in in episode 11. When it comes to Reagan's an interesting case study because, as you see in the episode, a lot of the foreign dignitaries and the intermediaries and the powers that be and all of these government entities, they didn't really look at Reagan as having the real power. They looked at Bush as having the real power, and some of those people around Bush. It was Bush, in fact, who convinced Reagan to sign the MLK holiday bill. It was Bush who would go on to start rogue intelligence agencies, private intelligence agencies that would work in cahoots with foreign intelligence agencies, including the Soviet Union. It was Bush who helped raise $18 trillion that they stored in offshore banks that was meant to fund the activities of these dark intelligence agencies, all for the purpose of building and pushing toward his so-called New World Order. Of course, you hear a lot of this stuff coming out of Bush's mouth himself, and so the fact that Reagan, when asked, was King a communist, the fact that his answer was, "We'll find out in 2027," rather than saying, "Yeah, of course he was a communist," means that the Bushes and these kind of shadowy people had more power than I think people care to realize. I'm trying to be careful in what I say here because in the climate of the Candace Owenses and all these different people who are, who are just saying a lot of things that are unsubstantiated, it's very easy to kind of just come off as yet another nihilistic black pill podcaster, which I'm not. But when it comes to what Bush was doing, what he was trying to do, what's been going on in this country for a very long time since its founding, quite frankly, in terms of this quest toward the overshadowing of state sovereignty. Of course, there was a debate during our founding over what kind of country will we be. Of course, we cover this in season 1 over whether we will be a truly federal government, not federal in terms of what it's become, but federal in terms of recognizing and acknowledging and respecting the sovereignty of the states. As Chuck points out in season 1, back in those days, it was unheard of that people would call themselves an American. They referred to themselves by their states. I'm a son of Tennessee. I'm a Virginian. I'm a Rhode Islander. You know what I mean? I'm a New York. So like people acknowledge their states because their states were sovereign, but then from there, the counties, and then from there, the families, and then the individual. They were all about sovereignty of the individual who were sons of their states. But of course, you had a different faction in the makeup who wanted a strong, overarching centralized federal government that superseded the sovereignty of the states. So this was the debate that was being had, and of course, Patrick Henry fell into the former group, and he didn't show up to the the Convention of States. He didn't show up to the Constitutional Convention because he famously said that I smell a rat, and it's because of Patrick Henry, that you ended up getting the Bill of Rights, which was supposed to act as guardrails for to prevent the overgrowth of the government. And so this term federalism was bastardized, and it's interesting that those who actually wanted a strong centralized federal government were called the Federalists, when in reality they were the ones who were the anti-federalists, and the ones who did want state sovereignty were called the anti-federalists, when in fact they were the real Federalists. So it's interesting how words work, especially over time, but that's neither here nor there. But my point is, when you look at someone like a George Herbert Walker Bush, he comes from this long line of people who believed and wanted a strong centralized power that would be relegated eventually into the UN, into the United Nations, as we point out in episode 11. Of course, King himself was an advocate for the United Nations. Anytime, for example, that you would see these marches that they would conduct, you would look in the crowd and you would see all these United Nations flags that they were flying. King famously marched to the United Nations in New York during Vietnam Week, I believe, in 67 or 68, basically airing out grievances that he had with the United States, and he wanted the United Nations to step in as it pertains to our involvement in Vietnam, and he wanted for the United Nations to basically indict, I guess, for lack of a better word, America for our involvement in Vietnam as a human rights atrocity. And so, whether you're looking at King or Herbert Walker Bush or any of these other people, the objective was to incrementally, bit by bit, little by little, erode the idea of state sovereignty, of individual sovereignty, the sovereignty of the family, and to consolidate all power into an entity or an arm like the United Nations. And so I don't know how I got off on this tangent. Let's see. Why did Reagan? Oh yeah, right. Why didn't Reagan expose? So this is what Reagan is up against. And to him, it may have seemed safer to say, look, I guess we'll find out in 2027 whether King was a communist, versus saying that, because in so doing, he is basically defying the Bush types and other handlers that Reagan had, who as president of the free world, you would think that he would have more confidence. But I mean, when you have seen presidents be assassinated, when your own life has been threatened, I mean, Reagan himself was almost assassinated, you might be more inclined to fall in line, as it were. That's why when people tell me, like, Chad, you should run for office, like, I have no interest in running for office, because the fact is many of these politicians are not beholden to their constituency. They're just not. We make such a big deal about voting. Oh yeah, we should go vote. You have a right to vote. People fought and died for your right to vote. And the fact is like, you realize that the game is fixed. And so it's like, yeah, I'm going to vote, because not for the purpose of I know this politician is going to get in and they're going to turn things around and do things. I don't vote for that. I vote because I still like to believe in the idea of America being a nation, complete with institutions. As small as I want those institutions to be, as small as I want the government to be, I want to preserve my nation. And to the extent that I just throw up my hands and take on this kind of nihilistic view, none of it matters anyway. It's like, you want to try to preserve some element of your nation, but I take peace. Genuine peace, genuine wholehearted peace, and the fact that it's God who sits on the throne, and that in the end, every knee will bow in heaven, on earth, and under the earth. My hope isn't in a politician. My hope isn't in an activist. My hope isn't in legislation. I don't care if it's the big beautiful bill or any of that. I don't like, my hope isn't in any of that. My hope is in Christ and Christ alone. And so while I'm in the flesh, while I'm on the side of heaven, I am tasked with the responsibility of making for the peace, structure, and stability in the land. And that includes, to some degree, being civically responsible. But my hope isn't in any of that. But I want to at least kind of prolong and preserve the fact that America is a nation. I'm hoping that makes sense. You asked about why Reagan didn't say publicly that King was a Marxist, and I got off on this tangent. But one thing I will say to your question is that he did say privately. I mean, we have handwritten letters from between Reagan and some congressmen and senators where he is acknowledging that King wasn't a patriot, that King was beholden to Marxist ideology. But for whatever reason, he didn't say it publicly. All he said was, I guess we'll see in 2027. So that's my long, whimsical, long-winded way of answering that question. Let's see. Third time watching it. Sound of Silence, haunting. I don't know if y'all heard that, but there was some animal interaction going on outside of my studio. And I don't have any pets. And I live in the country, so could have been anything. I don't know if y'all heard that growling outside. What the heck? Anyway, I guess I gotta grab my pistol when I leave the studio and go into the house. Let's see, somebody said they watched it three times. The Sound of Silence, haunting cello version. Love to hear your thoughts on using it and where you used it in episode 11. At least I think that was cello. Yeah, it was definitely cello. Cello is my favorite instrument, by the way. It's my favorite instrument, especially in cinema. I love the kind of haunting, emoting vibes, I guess you could say, of the cello. But yeah, The Sound of Silence, I chose it because it seemed very fitting for that particular episode. I'm going to do an extra live stream where I'm not where I'm not focusing on everything I've spent the first hour and a half focusing on in terms of like, yeah, this person said this, here's why they're wrong. Like, I want to do another live stream where I'm answering just your questions. And when it comes to that, I'm going to speak more into The Sound of Silence and why I chose it in that specific location. For now, I want more people to watch the episode before I give stuff away. And I know I've already given away a lot, but yeah, let me circle back to that question. Thank you for the question, though. I really appreciate it. But I want to give more people time to watch it. Let's see. Roger Oliver, great job. Keep it up. The old man needs to go to bed. Okay. Good night. Keep us informed so we can keep up with your work. Yeah. So on Patreon, I will be releasing a lot of deleted scenes. I will be doing it sporadically. I'm not going to give you dates, but I will be doing it sporadically. The reason I'm not going to give you dates is because some of it still needs to be edited, and I don't know when that editing is going to be completed. So I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. What is the next project you are working on? That's a really good question, Letitia Cox. I have some ideas. I plan on teaming up with Anomaly and doing a documentary. I was just speaking with Keisha King this evening, and I think we might do a documentary together as well. So we do plan on doing a feminism documentary. We do plan on doing a War Between the States documentary. We do plan on doing a FDR documentary that I want to be doing with Dr. Mary Graybar and Chuck Littleton. So we have a lot of and folks, when I make these documentaries, understand I make them with students in mind, right? The fact is, as the old saying goes, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And a lot of people are stuck in their ways. But God is a God of miracles. And I have seen people who are way up there in years who have watched these documentaries, watched these episodes, and have had their minds changed. You have to be open to having your mind changed, though. Especially if you are doing so from a biblical point of view. right? Because let God be true and every man be a liar, even me, right? You have to have discernment when you're looking at this stuff. So, you can't, the old saying, you can't teach a old dog new tricks. Yes, that's true for a lot of people, but for many, it's not. But when I make these docuseries, these documentaries, I make them with students in mind. This is why I'm so pleased with the fact that so many educators are saying that they're going to start incorporating the MLK project into their curriculum, which I'm excited about. And I plan to hit the homeschool circuit and start going to, homeschool conventions and, pitching the MLK project and selling it there and doing all these things. I also plan on meeting with the leader, the head of Classical Conversations. We're supposed to be having a meeting. But why do I say that? Yeah, we plan on making these documentaries so you have that kind of pictorial view of history, but also making curriculum to go along with it in order to begin to turn the tide of this kind of anti-Christian, anti-American curriculum that many of our students, including in homeschool, are getting. So when I make these documentaries, whether it's about feminism, whether it's about, the war between the states or whatever, it's with students in mind. It's with education in mind. So let's see. Sabrina Joy Stevens. I'll probably spend the next 15 minutes answering your questions, and then I gotta wrap it up. The jobs they create are great for themselves, 6 to 7 figures to feel like a good person, but not so much for the actual people they claim to work for. Not so much for the actual people they claim to work for. I don't know why I sound like a robot when I was reading that. Question. Where do you find these great archival videos? Oh, I search. I dig, and I search. It's actually a full-time job, quite frankly, to find this archival footage. And then too, like, I've been this way since I was a kid. You know how, like, if you're walking and you spot something and you make a mental note that that's right there, and you keep walking, and then whenever such a relevant time occurs where that thing is necessary to track back to, you recall, like, oh yeah, that was right there. That's how I am when it comes to things that I see in film, things that I see in archives, things that I hear in music. If I'm working on a scene and I'm thinking of B-roll for that scene, maybe it's something that Chuck said, maybe it's something that Vince Ellison said, maybe it's something that I said in my dialogue, and I'm trying to come up with B-roll, I will think back like, oh yes, I remember so-and-so said this, or I remember this or that archive. And then it's helpful to bring that in. So I know you're not asking like my process of tracking back on things, but yes, I do have a lot of obscure ways of going about getting into archives, delving into archives. If you're interested in documentary filmmaking, if you're interested in just, for fun, finding archives and rare footage, it's helpful to become a subscriber or a member of various college and university archival departments. That's a good place to start. Of course, you have to license a lot of the stuff that you find, or if you're using it for personal use, you don't even have to license it. You just pay like a $20 fee per clip. You can physically go to a lot of these libraries, a lot of these colleges and universities that have these archival departments, and you can get access there. A lot of it is digitized, so you can find it online. A good place to start would be archives.org. It's either .org or .com, but I'm pretty sure it's .org. Archives.org. I'm just going to go with that one. If I'm wrong, then try archives.com. But they have a movies tab, a videos tab. If you have a subject in mind that you want to research, just type in that subject and then click on movies. That will filter your search. You're able to find a lot of archival footage that way as well. If you're looking for print archives, newspapers.com. I highly recommend getting a subscription to newspapers.com. You can type in whatever subject you are looking into, and then you can narrow it down to a time period, specific dates. And I mean, these go all the way back to like the early 1700s, probably even earlier than that, where you can find archival newspapers that's been digitized in high definition, and you can get access to period articles on various subjects, on myriad subjects. So yeah, there's a lot of ways of delving into archives. As a historian, a lot of these resources are helpful when it comes to looking not at just what historians are saying, but what was actually going on at the time, because you're able to kind of break through the narrative chasm and see reality for what it is. Okay. Let's see. Any more questions? Where are you finding this archival footage? Okay, yeah, just enter that. I heard something, couldn't distinguish what it was. Yeah, you're talking about the animals outside. Yeah, I'm kind of begrudging having to go outside here in a minute. Okay, let's see. Do you use academic.edu? Yes, I do. Okay, looks like that's all the questions, unless I missed something. But anyway, I will be back. I'm not sure when. I think I might start doing a live every Sunday to pick up on the cadence that I was doing before venturing off into the MLK project. So yeah, if you want to keep listening to me blab, then I will be back next Sunday. Anyway, I love you all from the bottom of my heart. God bless you. God keep you. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for your contributions to the MLK project. Those of you who've contributed, for those of you who've seen the MLK project and you funded it, you helped fund, you gave, you donated. You can see your name at the end of the episode as the credits are rolling. I gave a special thank you to everybody who contributed to the MLK project. By the way, what did y'all think of the music choice as the film was ending? That's probably one of my high points, I would say, because a lot of what's in the film is a downer. A lot of what's in the film is very tragic, I guess you could say, but I wanted to end it on a positive note. So I was very selective in the music that I chose as the docuseries was ending. So any thoughts on that for those of you who've seen it? I guess you can write it in the comments as I'm closing out. But anyway, yeah, somebody said really uplifting. Yeah, I thought so. We have to end these things on a good note. We can't just spend 3.5 hours beating people all up beside the head and then just kind of leave it there. Like, no, you have to leave it on a positive note. Somebody said it gave me chills. I listened to it twice. Yeah, it's one of those songs that you have to listen to on repeat. You can't just listen to it once and go on about your day. I'm going to, let's see here. I'm going to bear with me one second. I'm going to actually put the link to the docuseries here in the comment section for those who are on YouTube and haven't seen it. And by the way, for those of you who are wanting to share the MLK project, or who are interested in what the big hoopla is about, and you don't want to watch 19 episodes, 8 episodes in season 1, 11 episodes in season 2, what do you guys think on Patreon? I'll communicate to people on YouTube through Patreon, or I'll be the middleman, I guess I could say, for those, because most of you who are watching here on Patreon, my thinking is you've seen it. Most of you who are watching on YouTube, my thinking is you probably haven't seen it. But my thinking is, and you guys on Patreon can tell me if you agree or disagree, is that really episode 11 can be treated as a standalone film in itself. Yes, it's the final episode of the entire series, but really it can be treated as, oh, this is a feature-length film that can really be watched without having to watch the preceding 18 episodes. What do y'all think? Are y'all in agreement with that? In other words, if you want to just buy episode 11 and make a decision from there as to whether or not you should go back and watch the previous 18 episodes, that's probably a good place to start. In fact, there are a couple of things in episode 11 that are reiterative. In other words, there are things that we already covered in the previous episodes, but they are reiterated in episode 11 to bring everything back into context, right? Some people might use the word redundant, but I use the word reiterative. They reiterate things that that were mentioned before, just for clarity. And that was the purpose of that, was bearing in mind that that some people actually might just watch 11 and not watch the entire series. So let's see. So I have any comments on Patreon that would agree with that? Let's see. The music throughout the series is really good stuff. Brother, you do a great job. Yeah, send it to the theaters. I actually might tour episode 11 in theaters. I'm debating that. Let's see. Yes, send it to the theaters. I think you could watch it as a standalone piece for sure, says Sabrina. But I definitely benefited from watching the whole thing in order. Maybe offer it as a standalone and or bundle, or season 1, episode 1. Let's see. They will miss out if they don't watch the whole thing. So yeah, I mean, you have kind of mixed interactions. It's not so much mixed interactions. I mean, it seems like everybody's saying to watch the whole thing, but there are at least one person or a couple people who are saying that episode 11 can be treated as a standalone feature. But episode 11 deals a lot with everything after King's assassination leading up to the present hour. It's really episode 10 because King actually gets assassinated in episode 10, and then we deal, for the most part, in episode 10 with the question of who done it, of who was responsible for the assassination of King. So that's what episode 10 does. That's why it's called a special episode. And then episode 11 doesn't really deal with who did it. It deals more so with what is the state of America after the assassination of King. So that's why it's 3.5 hours long. So anyway, just giving you guys some information, some intel as you're figuring out how you want to take bites out of this elephant that is the MLK project. So looks like I got another super on YouTube, the tubes, from the Scrapping Beauty. Hey, Scrapping Beauty, how are you? Glad to see you here. I don't know if you're still here or not, but thank you for joining us. Thank you for your candor. Sorry, a little pop-up just came and blocked your box. Okay. Thank you for your candor. Not easy. It's not easy. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for the super. All right. So let me remove that from the screen. Whoops. All right. So for real this time, I think I'm going to bounce. Somebody said he's back. I love the new look. 70s throwback. 70s throwback is crazy. I actually thought about cutting my hair today before going live, but I didn't have time. So anyway, grab your gun. Could be a Sasquatch. Yeah, where's my pistol at? Is my pistol in here? I heard something fighting out there. It was like right there by the door. So sounded like something big. Could have been I am in the country, so I don't know what that was. Anyway, I'm about to go see. Anyway, love you all again from the bottom of my heart. God bless. Thank you.